Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Community Practice Lead at the Exchange Lab. Today's conversation is on accessibility. On June 1st, David Hume, Assistant Deputy Minister, Government Digital Experience, and Ricardo Wagner, Microsoft Accessibility Lead, joined Jamie Boyd, Chief Digital Officer of the Digital Platform and Data Division for the Digital Government Monthly Update Call, a 30-minute monthly live stream conversation with thought leaders from inside and outside of government. Our topic was accessibility, and the conversation focused on stepping into the shoes of our user, interacting with inaccessible digital products or services, then finding out what strategies and guidance we have in place to support teams provide the best possible user experience. There were more questions than time. Thankfully, Ricardo and David kindly agreed to continue the conversation today on accessibility. I've been looking forward to continuing the conversation with the both of them. I've been fortunate enough to watch David and Ricardo connect with audiences. I watched David share the stage with Beth Simone Novak and John No Landry at the Canada School of Public Service in 2017. He was the first person to explain open government in plain language that anyone can understand and in a way that made you get it and understand why it is so important. A few years ago, Ricardo spoke at the Connect conference at the Victoria Conference Centre on accessibility. It was the first time I'd heard someone connect to the heart of accessibility through stories on how accessibility changed lives. It changed the way I looked at accessibility. Welcome, David and Ricardo. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. So let's start. We know that accessibility is a journey. It's not something that's ever done or perfect. A commitment to accessibility is a commitment to continuous learning as we become more aware of what people need from and how that changes over time so that we can respond to it. David, you talked about a time you failed in this area. Can you tell us a bit more about the experience and how it changed your approach moving forward?
Yeah, that was a few years ago. And it was in a time where we were trying to push around how we build better digital services. And so we had been working with partners at the Ministry of Health to improve how people could apply for the medical services program. So that's a program that anybody in BC needs to apply for so that they can get their BC Services card, they get their personal health number. You know, it's all that stuff that's become critical right now for people to get their vaccine, right? To have that PHN and to get that insurance, you know, so you can access the health system. And what we had been doing was taking what had been a pretty manual process, which was, you know, like fill in a form and mail it in, and turn it into something digital. And we went to work on it, and there were so many things that we did well. There's so many things where we were connecting with people and connecting with the staff that were administering that program. But the thing we missed in the end, we didn't realize that we had not put a good enough focus on accessibility. So we had really pushed the envelope in our technology. Like it was one of the, for those that are technical, it was one of the first adoptions of Angular JS in the public service. It was all open source. There was lots of good stuff, but our team just didn't have the focus that it needed on accessibility. And so when we realized this, we got to the end of the work, and we were set for a release. And I remember the go no go meeting, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh man, we really screwed this up." And I remember thinking, well, okay, so I guess we're not done. I guess our next step, we got to get this, we need to move this out the door because it's an improvement, but it's far from finished. And so we moved it out, and then we went through the work of retrofitting a lot of the things that had happened, or a lot of things that we had made. And it was, in the end, a really good thing, and we got it up to a high level. And the good part about it was all of us became really galvanized around that mission of making that better, because we realized the consequences of our oversight, you know, and which was, you know, leaving a huge segment of the population from being able to do this easily and effectively, which was our mission to begin with. So, you know, we got really galvanized around it, and we made it a lot better. And like you say, Ari, like there's always more to go. And I haven't worked on that particular program for a while, but I'm happy that we stepped into that problem once we realized it, and having had that experience, and I didn't want to perpetuate that again, because the stuff that we make affects a lot of people. So, and it needs to be universal. And when those of us who are on the inside, because of our bias, our privilege, our lack of awareness, or even like ignorance, right? Miss on that mark. Like I don't think we're meeting our mission. We got to do a better job. I think for us to be professionals, we need to figure that out. And so I grew as a result of that experience. I feel like I grew professionally. Because I now realized that this is something that I needed to put a focus on in my leadership so that it wouldn't get missed in the future.
And your team grew too, which is great.
Yeah, we all did. Like we realized we were missing a bunch of skills, right? So it was all those things were good. I guess what I'd say is like you got to be really careful about good news stories on these things, because somebody who was in a circumstance where they couldn't use that thing will be looking at it as like, well, I'm really happy that you learned as a result of my pain. You know what I mean? Like there's like a collateral, like we need to acknowledge those things, and that there's a cost to that for people, which for me, I think is just a more reason to get it right in the future.
Yes. So we have a lot of legacy tools and applications in government. How do you apply accessible practices to your work when you're working with tools that aren't in and of themselves accessible?
So you asking me or are you asking Ricardo?
You first, though.
Okay.
I'll get to Ricardo shortly.
Ricardo's good on this stuff. Well, the truth about this is like, this is actually not that hard. There's a lot of the stuff that you need to be able to work through accessibility is mostly, it's in your Word documents, it's in your PDFs, it's in your web pages, and we're not. Web pages are awesome. I work with them all the time. They do a ton of work for us. They're not new technology, right? And they're really cheap and easy to make. So it's mostly about raising your game around how you can understand what's there. And a lot of it is as simple as trying to navigate using your keyboard versus using your mouse, or it's as simple as getting a screen reader that you can run your technology through to see how it performs. And then there's guidance out there, like our group in collaboration with a lot of people across government publishes guidance at gov.bc.ca/accessible-gov. And you can find out more about how to get into the details and how to fix these things up. But I think it's also a real reason to go and modernize too, and helps build business cases. Like if you're working with a legacy application that just isn't meeting the grade in terms of accessibility, like what you got on your hands there is like that's a real problem. Like, and that needs to change. And so writing up that IMIT capital submission or whatever it is that you're working on, that business case, to be able to get funding, to be able to get stuff fixed up, should include that accessibility component. It'll help make the case, right? And I think that those are some of the things in terms of resourcing this stuff that we just need to be more conscious of as an organization, using not just our technical tools, but our business case tools and our strategy tools and our other elements that are kind of in a different part of the value chain around creating really strong services, and baking accessibility in there too. And that's how you can start to make more kind of systemic change.
I really like the approach in the answer from Dave. I truly believe that accessibility is not just about technologies, but it's the way you approach the topic. If you train people, if you change processes, I'll give some examples. How to ensure and train people to create accessible content. How you teach and empower people to share accessible content. Some examples like providing captions for videos. So I think that there are a few other components to think of the part of tech. So the piece of technology combined with processes and people. So when you bring these three together, people trained, aware of accessibility, with process in place that really help those with disabilities in the workplace. And technology that can be legacy or outdated technology, but if you have the combination of people that are informed and trained with the right process, this is a way to mitigate while the team is helping to catch up with the latest and greatest in technology. So I think it's important for us to think of this conversation not just from a tech perspective, but how humans interact with each other. Technology enable us, empower us, but cannot solve this conversation alone. It's a conversation that we need to mix and match with people, process, and technology.
Yeah, it really is a combination, and the human is the lead, is an important lead. To that, our resources are currently available to help support people who want to make sure their work is accessible. What are some of the challenges in this space? And I'll start with you, Ricardo.
Well, I would say the challenge is to access accessible content, as simple as like reaching out to an information that someone is sharing via email or via a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation. So just by using a very simple tool, call it check accessibility. Like many people, they do spelling and grammar before sharing a document, right? Just to ensure that the spelling and grammar is correct. The other tip we have is check accessibility. It's also part of the review command that you can experience inside all the Office 365 apps. And by simply applying check accessibility, you're going to get a report with details of things for you to perform and ensure accessibility before sharing a document. One example, suppose that after the COVID, you have a team meeting and the team decides to do a meeting in person. And because like the last time people met together as a team in person was last year, they want to take a picture. And they take a picture. And then they decide to share this with everyone via email. So if you don't provide alt text, which is a way for you to describe the content inside the image, a person using a screen reader may not be able to experience or understand the context and the detail of the picture that you are sharing. So when you check accessibility, the tool will provide an option for you to include alt text describing the details of the image. For example, telling that John, Jeff, and Mario, they were all together walking on a trail. So this is an information that you can provide, and it makes the content accessible for a person. This is a very simple example, but can be a little bit more complicated when you share business as usual conversation. For example, an important report of an image that contains so many details that someone needs to perform a task. So just by checking accessibility before sharing a content, this can be like life-changing in so many ways. We recommend when we share our own experience, the experience we have inside Microsoft, is to think about creating, consuming, and sharing accessible content. These three simple ideas: create, consume, and share. Just by having this mindset can help you to ensure that people experience the content that you are sharing, that people can really participate in a conversation and working as a team.
Oh, that's great. And I assume after a while you just start getting quite good at it, and just because it's like a mentor. Over time, you use it less and less because you start to figure it out.
Absolutely. One of the quotes that I love. If you visit the Microsoft lab in Redmond, you're going to see on the wall saying, "If you don't intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude." I think this intentionality, by becoming aware that what you are doing, you are intentionally including a teammate, someone that is part of your team, or someone who is part of the organization, who's going to feel included with a strong sense of belonging, saying, "Hey, this organization is working in ways that we all can participate, no matter the technology we use or the abilities we have. I think this is the key goal, and it is super nice to see the journey that we are sharing together as organizations, of evolving and learning over time. And I think one of the learning that I have working with you is the idea of nothing about us without us. You are building this accessibility journey with and for persons with disabilities, and ensuring that they are part of this process and helping you to decide which technology to acquire, which technology to use, which process to define, and how to train people. So that's really a benchmark in we are super happy to see this type of partnership in place.
Yeah, I really agree with Ricardo. The Microsoft tools there are great. Actually, I use them regularly, and it's really helpful. And as well, I mentioned too I referenced that URL earlier, gov.bc.ca/accessible-gov, and in there you'll see a whole bunch of things related to accessibility and kind of what's happening in government from a policy and guidelines perspective, even as well as our accessibility and inclusion toolkit. And so if you dig in there as a web resource, you're going to learn about assistive technology. You're going to learn about how to understand diversity in the audience or the group of people that you're trying to reach. You're going to learn about creating content, digital content, as Ricardo is talking about. Well, there's even stuff about documents and having meetings that are accessible, how to do testing, the training, how to do design and web development, are all part of that accessibility and inclusion toolkit. And I think it's a really powerful resource for people because it covers a lot of the things that we need to do organizationally to help ourselves to get better on this front and further ourselves along the journey. So that's a resource that I really encourage people to look at. It's updated regularly, and I know that the team that works on it is really proud of it, and the team that the group of employees that have generated it, and the community of people that are out there. I think what the team told me, I think we have something like 600 people part of our accessibility and inclusion community practice. And I think that's a really important resource too, because it's, you hop on the web and you read some stuff, right? And then you probably have more questions than you do have answers. And so to join in the community of people across the organization that are trying to champion this can really help accelerate things. And I think together, we've just got to try and keep on creating this norm that to be professional means to be accessible and inclusive.
Yeah, for sure. And all of the links will be in the show notes at the end, so you can go look for yourself and then connect with the communities. So accessibility is fundamentally a people problem, and creating an inclusive environment takes self-awareness, empathy, and humility. How can we confront our biases, and how do we hold each other accountable? Ricardo?
That's a very good question. So at Microsoft, we apply what we call Microsoft Inclusive Design. So Microsoft Inclusive Design has 3 principles which helps and guide us to ensure that what we build, we are building solutions that are not excluding people. Again, exclusion, it's something to think that exclusion in decision-making can happen. And if we just try to solve problems based on our own bias, we are likely to include some and exclude probably few or many, depending on how you are designing or how you are approaching the ideation and the creation of a solution. So 3 principles of inclusive design, which are super simple. The very first one is recognize exclusion. Is if you are creating a solution, if you are bringing a new feature to life, ask yourself, who is not going to be able to experience, who is not going to be able to interact with what I'm creating? And that's the very first question we make. And when we make this question, we realize that there are many people in different situations, either permanent, temporary, or situational, that may not be able to experience what we are doing. And then the second principle tell us to invite those who are excluded, the ones who are first detected as excluded from the idea, to be part of the innovation. So the second principle of inclusive design is to learn from diversity. And throughout this process, you start to identify ways to make your solution inclusive, accessible, in ways that can work for those who were excluded before. And once you make it work, you go to the third principle of inclusive design, which is once you make it work for one, you extend to many. So one of the interesting aspects of accessibility is sometimes people think that accessibility is a technology for persons with disabilities. Actually, accessibility is for everyone. It can work for a person with a permanent disability, can work for a person with a temporary, a situational, or a person without disabilities. Just think of captions as an example. Captions can empower a person hard of hearing to join a conference call or a video. Can also empower a foreign language speaker to follow the conversation. Or if you are attending the session in a noisy environment, it can also help you. Or if a teacher is teaching with captions, the students can listen and read what the teacher is saying. So the content can be retained and can retain more information from the content that is shared. So this is a very important aspect that if you recognize exclusion, you invite those who are excluded to be part of the ideation and the creation process at the beginning, not at the end. So accessibility should not be a cosmetic conversation after the fact, but at the beginning. And you make it work for one and you extend to many, you are likely to address a situation of excluding a population. So this is what Microsoft applies when we develop tools, including Microsoft 365, Microsoft Surface, Microsoft Xbox, so all different features. It is a journey. There are products that we are really leading the way. There are products that we still need to do a better work. And this is the opportunity we have in this field, because every time we come up with an innovation, this also sets the bar for us to catch up and ensure that we bring accessibility to life. So accessibility, again, back to the first question from our conversation today, is a journey.
Thanks. And to you, David?
I mean, it's a big question. Like there's a couple things that come to mind. One is knowing what kind of guidance is out there, right? So you understand if you're making something, is there a standard that you need to meet? And there are, right? When there's web content accessibility guidelines that are out there, and government of BC needs to be hitting at least a 2A standard on that. And we don't always, right? But that's the standard that we ought to be hitting. So that's one way of holding yourself accountable, because you can audit and test against that. So you have a bar, right? But I think interpersonally, it's really important to reflect on how diverse your team is, right? Sometimes in Victoria, we can be pretty homogenous. I think and then if that's true, then it's the work to do to get out and test with people that need to be part of the solution, and ideally even collaborate with them to help make the thing, if they got time, right? Because and so pushing yourself so that you learn more from the people that are that have things to help, things to teach us, that are different have a different experience than we do, so that our empathy grows and our knowledge grows, and we back that up with some, rules, right, or standards that help us be clear about where we need to get to. Those are a couple of different ways, and I just think it's in challenging ourselves. We've just got to kind of look at our teams and talk to one another about, as Ricardo was saying, like who are we excluding by not including, right? And how can we find our way to be able to connect with people in a way that helps us grow our own empathy and our understanding and our skill set, because that's in the end what it comes down to. As you said, Ari, like, it's a people thing, right? It's mostly about what we carry around and our knowledge and, and how we connect with people, our values, what's in our heart in the end. And so bringing those things together so that we make better things that work better for more people. I think it's a great mission. And I think it's one that we got to keep on working, sharing with one another so that we grow in all those different ways to, as you say, hold ourselves accountable and continue to get better.
One question. Can you tell me what a 2A standard is?
So there's a thing called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are created by the World Wide Web Consortium. So this is an international group that looks at all things internet. And there's a long story about the World Wide Web Consortium. It was started by Tim Berners-Lee. And so the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines have a number of kind of grades. It's all like you could think of the A as like stars, like Michelin stars, So your dish is better the higher stars, the number of stars you get. So there's this 1A, 2A, and then there's a 3A standard as well. I think Ricardo, correct me if I'm wrong. There's work for kind of more extension of each one of those different grades of the WCAG standards too, isn't there?
You covered them all. In another important perspective from legislation, it's not just from the web. There is also things related to data privacy and legislation that includes the Canadian legislation, Accessible Canada Act, some legislation from a province perspective, and there are specifics related to BC. Some others, so for example, from Microsoft, that we need to comply from ADA in US, legislation from Europe as well. So there are different standards and guidance by regions and countries as well. So this is somehow a bit complex, but the key idea is to ensure that organizations, they create accessible and inclusive workplaces for talents with disabilities. So that's the goal of this legislation, is just to ensure the basics are done.
Yeah. So that 2A is kind of like that second grade up, and then there's the highest grade is the AAA.
Great. Thanks. Accessibility isn't always about the physical body. Barriers to access can be related to geography, infrastructure, language, and many other factors. Given how much of BC exists outside of Victoria and Metro Vancouver, how do we ensure an accessible experience for people who might be geographically remote or don't have access to high-speed internet or other technical supports we have for granted? David?
Well, our colleagues at Service BC do an awesome job helping people connect with services right in community, right? So if there are bandwidth issues, there's an opportunity to come in and be face-to-face with somebody. And Service BC does a magic job of that. If you've ever been into one of those offices, there's just so much you can get done. And the people there are so helpful. So that's one aspect to it. I think we learned a lot through work, or I've been learning a lot working on getting vaccines to British Columbians, about the different barriers and the different ways in which we need to communicate differently for in the north or relative to the lower mainland. Learned a lot about connecting with people and the language that they speak. And we've been really pushing to try and expand. Well, we have been expanding the number of languages that information about COVID-19 is available to people out there. And I think that's been really helpful. There's, as we try and learn how to connect with people more effectively, I'm hopeful that will turn into us doing a better job at keeping our content simple, keeping our content accessible in all those different aspects. But there's a lot of dimensions, right? And it's tough, right? Because in the end, there's probably just one person who's going to write some things, and which is the magic of the web, or the magic of, campaigns to try and spread these things out. So there's a lot of knowledge that it takes to be able to do that well. So we're busy kind of going out and meeting people in communities to learn from them about how to do this better, to be connected, be more inclusive, have more inclusive content, more inclusive ways of reaching people. Because a lot of the ways that we do it as a province are, pretty broadcast in the way that it's on our websites, on our social media. There's probably paid advertising campaign. There might be like rat cards or posters or things like that. But that's not going to connect everywhere. And continuing to work on the question of like, how do you connect to the disconnected? There's got to be ways, right? But how do we discover those so that we're, and so we're putting a focus there right now and hopeful that we'll learn something that we can take forward.
Yeah, I bet the vaccine really changed how everyone sees how to connect.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like where you want to try and get as many people as you can. There's some people that aren't going to do it because they don't want to, but that you don't want to leave any barrier in place for somebody to be able to get the information they need. And it's the same thing with all of the COVID-19 information that we've been working on. We need to help people understand how to keep themselves safe through the pandemic. And there can't be any reasons why we got to try and remove as many barriers to that as possible. And there's so many, but we're trying to remove as many as we can.
To you, Ricardo.
That's Ari, I think COVID and the pandemic situation just brought to life this conversation in a way that before we had assumptions like it's going to be really challenging with our culture or our organization for people to work remote. With COVID, we had no other option other than the hybrid or the remote work. And throughout this process, people actually realized that, yes, it is possible to work from home. Depending on the setup and what you do and the technology you have, it's actually better to work remote versus working in person. So I think that with this new situation that we all experience, we envision that this hybrid model will take place. And over time, we're going to figure out ways to bring internet connectivity, broadband to places where we don't have cover today, or leverage internet connectivity in places where we are already offering or covering and letting people to work remotely. So this will, although we can think this from a challenging point of view, we should also think from an opportunity point of view, opportunity to attract talents, to connect with students, to connect with communities, to connect with vulnerable and excluded communities through technology. So there are many new scenarios and possibilities for all of us to explore. And by doing this with accessibility in mind, will make us achieve the goal from the province of ensuring that the representation of the population that you serve is reflected inside the organization, that the workplace is reflected with the diverse community that you assist. We are experiencing a great, I would say, momentum in terms of the use of technology, especially the accessible technology, to address these mismatches. I believe this is going to be an ongoing conversation as we evolve, but we made a tremendous progress. So just by watching what happened in the last 2 years with the governor of British Columbia, moving from a legacy, what we call on-premise, which was not leveraging cloud solutions, which you are leveraging today, it enabled us to approach so many different new technologies and speed up this conversation and ensure that every single person will be included in part of this conversation. So, I would say the key highlight is, unfortunately, with the event of the COVID and pandemic, it helped us all to change our point of view of possibilities in ways to communicate, work, and collaborate. And I believe that this is going to be the new normal moving forward, and many possibilities for us to do better.
Yeah, it really changed the playing field. Everything's different now. It's like such a new, nice play field to see what we can do in the future now. Last question. Barriers to access often occur as a result of dysfunctional processes that haven't considered users' needs. How can we ensure that we're including accessibility as part of our approach for delivering digital services and government information? And how do we convince others that it's more than nice to have?
Okay. Well, this is one that's close to my heart. So I think we talked a little bit about it, and Ricardo articulated it really well. Like, this is not a thing that you do at the end. This is a thing that you do right from the start. So, if you think about the different points at which you might be trying to make an improvement, like even conceptualizing it, right? Like, oh, there's a thing there. Or how can I find out if I have a question about why my service isn't working or how I might improve it? Have I included accessibility as one of the areas to focus on improvement? As I'm writing up the case that I need to make for the resources to make that fix, is accessibility a part of that case? If I'm successful, have I got a contract or a procurement that asks and specifies that the folks that might be coming to help us to build these things, if we're contracting out, include skill sets that are evaluated, right, to award that contract based on accessibility knowledge and skills. So have you got that as a part of your evaluation criteria for procurement? And then when you get the team together, or if you're into that place where you're lucky enough to have a team in-house, having the conversation about accessibility, what you need to know, working through that guidance, and then so that you can start to make great things together. But it really starts with that kind of agreement, that principle that you're applying all the way through that improvement process. And I guess the last thing I'd say is, like, get out of your office, go meet some people, go talk to folks, go test the thing, go see what's going on. But it's also important that, like, all of those things, when you go and find out often the ugly truth about what you've made, that you got to have the things on the back end, or I shouldn't say the back end, but within the team to be able to respond. And that's all starts with right at the very beginning of that value stream, to be able to make something better. Because that's often what happens, right? Is you'll go out and you do that testing and you'll say, I don't know what to do about this. And how can I and then the time pressure is on, and all those kinds of things start to happen. So that's what I really recommend, is be having this in mind right from the beginning. And for me, talking to my exec colleagues, encouraging them to put the pressure on, right? From a governance perspective, is like, where is that? What are we doing on that? How are we doing? And asking the kind of pokey questions to ensure that teams are responding.
And I'll ask the last question to Ricardo. Barriers to access often occur as a result of dysfunctional processes that haven't considered our needs. How can we ensure that we're including accessibility as part of our approach for delivering digital services and government information on how do we convince others that it's more than nice to have?
Number one is the concept of nothing about us without us. Work with and for persons with disabilities. Invite persons with disabilities to be part of this conversation. Invite them to sit down with the team and discuss what to do. Not make them part of the table, not at the menu. So ensure that the right stakeholders are involved, and include persons with disabilities. That's the number one tip. The second is, don't approach this topic just thinking that you are making a solution for a specific population. Think of accessibility as something that can benefit us all, either permanent, temporary, situational. It's something that you enhance experience. You enable more people to connect in a meaningful way. And third, it's a conversation that you can think as a way to approach innovation, drive efficiency, reduce cost. So there are so many benefits that we can approach from this conversation in terms of economical value, a social impact, legislation. So there are many perspectives that we can bring to life to ensure accessibility by design. But I'll say the most important, the key takeaway that I want to leave is nothing about us without us. Do include persons with disabilities and make sure that they are part of all the process. So the best way to speed up and connect with the entire organization to make this big transformation, every single hiring manager or person or leader who is listening to this podcast, think about who is going to be the next person you're going to hire. Ensure to hire a person with visibility to really bring this diverse perspective in your team.
Thank you. And thank you, both of you, for taking the time to share your thoughts. Really appreciate it. In the future, if you have any questions, email me at ari.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca. I would love to hear your feedback, comments, and suggestions. And thanks for listening.